is the answer to her anxiety just giving her hormone replacement therapy?
Yeah.
And the answer could be yes. Or what's really important when it comes to developing a healthy immune system and therefore a healthier endocrine system is to make sure that you're feeding your babies, feeding yourself, even biological dad, is foods that are whole foods, that are anti-inflammatory, that are free of preservatives. I think that sperm quality is often ignored.
Yes.
And we know that anxiety can come very strongly through the health of the sperm.
Specifically, let's walk through how panic and anxiety impact hormones.
Yeah. So when we are really panicky and anxious, our body evolutionarily is we're in danger. Now is not the time to reproduce. So we will find that we produce less estrogen when we're really anxious, that the estrogen tends to be more inflammatory. Inflammation can activate the amygdala in the brain. That's the big feeling, anxiety producing part of the brain. That's like, oh my gosh, there's a tiger. When we have those feelings of danger, those environmental feelings of danger, our testosterone can go down. And so when we have low testosterone, we have less muscle building, we have less of that connectivity, we have less of that endurance, we have more mood swings.
Yeah.
We also see that our insulin can go up, and that's because we are in fight, flight, freeze, and our sugars are being released to give us energy to fight, flight, freeze. So now your body is releasing a bunch of insulin, and then we get insulin resistance. So here's an example. Can I walk through an example patient that kind of touches on those hormones?
Of course.
So I had this woman that came into my office many years ago, and she had horrible anxiety and insomnia. And her estrogen was really low, her progesterone was really low, her testosterone was really low, her cortisol was really high, and her doctor was like, let's put you on HRT. And she was a little nervous about that. So we did a whole case analysis with her. And one of the components of it is we actually started with the airway. And so we went to her birth story. And when she was born, her mother was unable to breastfeed. And when we breastfeed, it helps to shape the airway. It helps to shape the mouth, the palate. And so she had an angularity in the chin, and she wasn't pushing her tongue up and creating this sucking. She was given bottles. And so we can see correlations between bottle-fed babies and breastfed babies. And one of the other experiences that she had is really bad congestion. So she had this history. She didn't get all that yummy probiotic bacteria from the mom, and she was bottle fed. Her airway changed. And so now she's congested. She can't breathe through her nose. So she's breathing through her mouth. Our mouth has bacteria in it, and it has enzymes that help us with digestion. So she had changes in the composition of her mouth. We were able to do salivary testing. She had lots of opportunistic bacteria in there, and she had overgrowths of that. And we know that the bacteria in the mouth can seed the bacteria in the gut and can seed the bacteria in the brain. The brain isn't a black box. We know that there's bacteria in the brain. So now she has this imbalance of bacteria in her mouth. She has an imbalance of bacteria in her gut, and she has lots of inflammation, and that inflammation is changing the acid-base balance. And now she has an overgrowth of bacteria that don't like being in this, the good bacteria that she wants don't like being in this balance. And so they're getting crowded out. She gets leaky gut. The inflammation in the gut goes to the brain, breaks down the blood-brain barrier. And now she's got leaky symptoms in the brain. And now the brain is inflamed. And now the body's like, we don't want to reproduce. So that hypogonadal axis, she's not getting the estrogen and the progesterone. But you see, I know this is really complicated and most people probably just dissociated. So if you come back, what you're asking, and I love that you're asking this, is the answer to her anxiety just giving her hormone replacement therapy?
Yeah.
And the answer could be yes, or maybe yes, and what's going on with the why of her anxiety? And for her, it started when she was a baby. So her treatment plan, what we're doing to treat this is she's seeing an airway dentist and an ENT who's helping to open up the airway because that's the structural root cause for her. And she's doing the probiotics and all of that.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I interviewed Dr. Stacy Whitman, who's a functional dentist, and she's fantastic. And we talked about this. And I have a 20-month-old. I'm going to have a second baby any day now. And it's brought to life, again, how important this window of the first 1,000 days of life is, right? So conception to year 2. And we don't think about things like anxiety or depression or mental health issues within that first 1,000 days. We hardly think about our baby, whether it's a boy or a girl, their hormone health within that first 1,000 days. And yet that very, very delicate time is laying the foundation for what could be anxiety when they're 35. And I think it's really, you're hitting on something that's so important with this. And so maybe walk us through your perspective of how that foundation is laid, whether it be through breastfeeding, connection with the mother, all of these things, and the importance of, the very early childhood development and how some of these things impact us 30 years later.
Yeah, we inherit our microbiome from our biological mother. And it begins with the birth and delivery. And ideally, and this isn't a reality for everybody, ideally we would have a vaginal birth and the baby could be covered in all of that wonderful microbiome from the vaginal tissue. And ideally we wouldn't wash the baby immediately. That's right. And just let the baby get all of those yummy, happy, diverse little bugs in their body. And ideally, we would nurse them and you get this wonderful colostrum and you get all this milk, which has enzymes and nutrients. And ideally, the baby would get hugged and touched by lots of people in your family. Of course, people who are healthy and they're not like running around with COVID or anything. But that we set the baby off with a great diverse microbiome. And let's say that someone's listening to this and they're like, I wasn't able to do a vaginal delivery and they wouldn't let me do a VBAC. Some solutions, and this is a little bit off label, what I'm about to say. So talk to your OB. I'm not an OB, but some people and some doctors opt to, if you can't do a vaginal delivery, is doing a vaginal swab of the bacteria and giving that to the baby. And so there are things that we can do. And let's say that now your kid is 10 and you're like, well, it's a little late for that. I'm not going to put a vaginal swab on my 10-year-old. Is that thanks to really great, passionate researchers and manufacturers like your guys' company, is that we have access to amazing, diverse gut microbiome and probiotics. But what's really important when it comes to developing a healthy immune system and therefore a healthier endocrine system is to make sure that you're feeding your babies, feeding yourself, even biological dad, is foods that are whole foods, that are anti-inflammatory, that are free of preservatives. I think that sperm quality is often ignored. Yes. And we know that anxiety can come very strongly through the health of the sperm. And so we want to make sure that dad is also doing self-care and taking care of his body and taking care of his microbiome and the biome on his body when he's hugging baby skin to skin. Yeah. And so the gut microbiome is a piece of it. But I think, as you were saying too, is I love that you talk to somebody who's aware of mouth, airway, and structure. Is start when they're early, is allow that sucking, and then also chewing hard foods when it's age appropriate. Is so many American children are just fed soft foods because we're also worried that someone's going to choke or break a tooth. But that's important too, is eating hard foods and chewing hard foods. So tell me, I feel like you're like vibing with this. I want to hear what you think.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. And I mean, one of my personal goals with everything, with this company and beyond is, especially now kind of in this, early stage of motherhood, is how do we get as upstream as possible, right? How do we get kind of ahead of the problem before it starts? And so that's why I've had for years this, passion and desire and fascination with the first 1,000 days of life, because it is the number one window of opportunity that we have to impact human health. And we don't think about things like anxiety and depression and hormone health during that window when we should be, even if it is just from an environmental toxin perspective, airways, breathing, obviously, food, starting with breast milk and then onward.